Welcome on in another Monday night episode of the Wolverine podcast here on the Wolverine YouTube channel. Also, for those of you, shout out to the folks that don't watch live and will catch us in the podcast feed after the fact. Anthony Broome here with Clayton Sayfie. It'll just be the two of us tonight talking another dismantling of Ohio State. I can't even believe those words are coming out of my mouth. It's about time. We'll take your questions on that. We will preview Saturday's Big Ten Championship, at least an early preview. We'll do the full preview on Thursday of this game with Purdue. And then just a busy news day, too. Cade McNamara is in the transfer portal. Big Ten weighs in on the tunnel stuff and all that type of discourse going on. But before we get things started, first, leave a like on this video below. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I'll also intro my esteemed co-host, Clayton Sayfie, who got to take in the last few minutes of that game on the field.
Yeah, it was incredible. What a weekend. What a day for Michigan. Just talking to people in the aftermath and our conversations on the trip home with all of us, and including Chris Balas and John Borton for part of it. It was one of the best performances from a Michigan team in history. Doug Karsh said in an article over at thewolverine.com, check that out, Michigan's play-by-play man, that it's probably the most impressive game he's covered. I was talking to John Borton, who obviously has been doing this a lot longer than us. After the game, he said it's one of the top second halves that he's ever seen. And it's definitely the best performance I've ever seen from a Michigan team. Just unbelievable the way they hung in there in the first half, despite not being able to get the ground game going, despite Ohio State hitting on a few big plays, but they settled in defensively. They settled in and made some big plays on offense. And then the run game starts hitting in the second half. And it felt like last year where Michigan was the team that was stronger. Michigan was a team that was, again, more physical, even though Ohio State displayed some more physicality in the first half. And they were more mentally tough, and they won this game going away. And it probably should have been 52-23 if it weren't for, a lot of people calling it kind of a pity whistle on that fumble that should have been out. So, What a weekend in Michigan, now heading to Indianapolis to play Purdue. I will be honest with you, Anthony. I hardly know anything about Purdue. Like, I've watched them a few times throughout the season, but in terms of moving on to an opponent, me as a writer who covers this team, so it doesn't matter about my preparation, but I have not moved on quite yet to Purdue, but we can talk about them. Just so much fun right now, and Michigan is obviously every Michigan fan out there is living it up.
You have to start asking yourself, Clayton, what are you personally doing to beat Purdue today? So, yeah, we'll get to, and shout out to Shane Johnson. We'll get to his super chat marathon here in a moment. Again, if you want to move yourself, questions, comments to the front of the line, use that donate feature below. I'm just going to start using these like a telethon. We're trying to raise money to go to the playoffs. So that's the goal right now. That's the objective. Richard also Brooks says $1.99. What does Shane Johnson do for a living? So I can do it. We'll get to you, Shane. We want to give you almost a whole segment here. But before we get into Shane's stuff, I just want to say, and it's in the thumbnail for this show, Michigan broke Ohio State. Like, this is, Ohio State is soft, and they are a finesse team, and they are a program that has built to be like basketball on grass the last couple of years. And for the second year in a row, Michigan broke that program. They broke the fan base. They broke the team. They broke the coaching staff, broke the quarterback. 42-27 and 45-23. You have completely flipped it. We've been there before. We've covered games on the flip side of that. 62-39, 56-27. This is more than just a rivalry win, or if you're Ohio State, a rivalry loss. It is, you are now in full-blown identity crisis mode. And for Michigan to become the program that does that it just adds another notch in the belt for this being, I've said this a million times at this point, the most remarkable coaching turnaround, program resurrection that I think I've ever seen, just in terms of how dark that COVID season got to now. We're going to have a steak on Friday night in Indianapolis for the second year in a row. So it's been incredible. Thoughts on the game have been well plowed at this point. But let's just go to let's get through these, Shane, and not get through. We love you, Shane, but there's a lot to chew on here. So we'll start with Super chat number 1, and Clayton, I might need you to do some running math for me, at least in terms of dollar amount.
Yeah.
Shane Johnson says Jim Harbaugh cemented his Michigan legendary coaching status. Since his iconic quote, "We are going to beat them or die trying," Michigan is 24-2 with 2 dominating wins against them. Shane goes on to say Jim Harbaugh finally turned the Tressel-Meyer-Day rivalry tide on Saturday to our favor, and it's the first time for me in a very long time that I no longer feel intimidated by them. It is a tremendous feeling.
So should we take these two kind of as a pair? Because Shane, we appreciate you. Jim Harbaugh was talking earlier. We were over at Schembechler Hall, and he was holding court for about a half hour, and he was saying, JJ's a legend now, Donovan's a legend now, all these guys. Shane Johnson, in my book, is also a legend. So we appreciate you. Make sure anybody else want to get the super chats in, you can skip up to the front of the line like Shane did. But he's absolutely right. So, and I think he worded that first comment really well, because he's now a legendary Michigan coach. He was already a legendary Michigan player. And then I was having this conversation even before the game, actually, with my brother. We were saying, in terms of a Mount Rushmore of guys in Michigan history who mean, the most to this program, I don't know if he's in the top 4. There's certainly an argument to be made if you take into account his playing career and his coaching, but he's in that top 10. He's climbing almost by the week here, by the year. And it's been incredible to watch. He was down and out 2 years ago. Or at least, according to some, and they were able to come back and do what nobody thought they were going to do over these last couple of years. And now you're right, Shane. It feels like, and I can tell you this from being there, and then as Anthony said, being on the field for the last 7 minutes of that game, where it's Ohio State fans that were the ones filing out. It was the Michigan fans from the upper deck coming down, moving closer, filling in those empty seats. It was, at one point, Anthony, I turned to you, I was like, look around at just how silent 106,000 people are. It was incredible to see. We've seen it for years the other way, and now we're finally seeing it this way, where when things get tough in the second half and it's coming down to the wire, it was Michigan rising to the occasion, and it was Ohio State buckling, I think, to use your term, from up in the press box, Anthony. So it's incredible, and credit to Jim Harbaugh, the guys he's hired on this staff. He was raving about all those guys earlier, and the players on this team who really do have the mentality of their head coach. And now you're seeing similar success to when their head coach was here playing. And it's a hell of a lot better than being on the other side. And we know what that feels like.
Shane goes on to say JJ's 19-yard scramble and his touchdown run in the third quarter, running through and over several Ohio State players, were pivotal plays that don't get much hype with all the fireworks in the game, but they confirmed how soft Ohio State was. Continuing to speak about JJ, Shane says JJ legend started this week in his and Michigan versus everyone sweatshirt, quoting, "The stars are aligned and the rest of the meat will come off the bone," and delivered an epic performance in the country's most difficult venue. And I'll keep chugging along here. Shane goes on to say Ben Herbert, Michigan's strength and conditioning coach, is a big part of Michigan's 3 C's: conditioning, culture, and coaching. Best conditioned second half football team in America. Another legend. And we'll just keep talking about legends here because Shane threw a lot at us. Michael Barrett, 11 tackles and a flag plant. Legend. Rod Moore, his first 2 years, flawless safety play against their NFL wide receivers. Legend. The Don with one hand, Donovan Edwards. Legend. The Joe Moore repeat winners. Legend. We'll see about the Joe Moore Award, but I don't, at this point, it seems like it would take too much effort to take it out of Michigan's weight room. So you may as well just leave it there. More legend talk from Shane. Mike Sainristil started the fourth quarter to the defense. This is where the natty starts. Two-way player, 2 years in a row, balling in the game. Another legend. On to Cornelius Johnson, saying we can connect on the long balls. Legend. Minter's defense, holding the country's best offense at home to 2 touchdowns, and at times with 5 true freshmen. Tremendous. Extend him now. And then last one, he has a message for Chris Balas, who is not with us tonight. Says he loves Chris Balas' brother. Love you, brother, for always giving it straight and for your awesome, positive pregame part 2 column in the Fort I read Saturday morning. That really took my week-long shaky confidence level over the top. So I don't have my abacus out, but Shane Johnson, legend for his support of this show and and all that he does for us. So we'll keep going through these other super chats here. I've got one from Kim Upton, 1099 or 999. It's asked, why weren't the Wolverines allowed on the field for the national anthem? Was it Ohio control? We felt that was the first of many bad choices for Ohio State. I don't know that that's something we'll camp out on for too long, but if I remember the sequence of events correctly, Ohio State had a pretty long and lengthy senior day celebration that I think maybe have had something to do with that. I don't know. Kim, we appreciate the support on that one. Your financial support, we appreciate it.
I like the question though, because not everyone that is there, you don't necessarily see it. I'm pretty sure, Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, or if you remember at the Big House this year, I don't know if either team's on the field for the anthem, because they do it. And then the band, once Michigan runs past the banner, and I know they've done that differently in years past, but I think it had to do with senior day, probably because Ohio State was on the field. Maybe neither of them would have been in a normal environment, but obviously doesn't matter a ton. But I'm pretty sure at the Big House this year, neither team's been out there for it. It's just kind of more of a timing thing, maybe with TV dragging it out, or I don't know what it would be.
I'm not sure. I have noticed that though. There haven't been any teams on the field in Ann Arbor for the anthem this year. So,
okay, yeah. So that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a good question. Wish we had an answer for you. We'll go to Devin Scott's $10 super chat here, who says, "How do you explain the stark difference between half one and half two? Seemingly in every way. This wasn't us pounding them for 3 to 4 yard runs in half one, then blowing it open. It was 0 yard runs." I want you to start with this one. What did you see?
So I thought it is a good question, because especially the run game, there was just a huge difference, and they couldn't get anything going. That's what really scared me with, Michigan hit on a few of those big plays, but were they really in it, or was it like a Penn State type of deal where they were only down 2 at half to Michigan, but Michigan had dominated? I didn't think it was.
We had that exact conversation.
Yeah, we did have that conversation. So I don't think it was quite to that level. But it felt like, well, if Michigan's going to play this game with one hand tied behind its back due to not having Blake Corum, having half of a Donovan Edwards, at least his upper body, and they didn't seem willing to run him as much early on. So it felt like, he was limited. Then I think they decided, well, we got to give this a shot. And then, you did see things. I think it was JJ that said after the game that it's kind of like pipes bursting. Like there's all this pressure. There's all this pressure, and then finally it bursts, and you saw that with the 75 and 85-yard touchdown runs from Donovan. Great blocking on both those. But even to come out in the half, there were some bigger holes. He sprung a couple 9-yard runs, stuff like that. I don't know how I would explain it other than to say, to go back to Shane's super chat and talk about Ben Herbert, who Jim Harbaugh tried nominating for the Broyles Award. He got denied. They said, we're just going to nominate Jesse Minter for you. And Harbaugh said, great choice. It's not quite the award for him because he's not an on-field assistant. They obviously have laid out criteria. I love the move to try to get the strength coach in there, but he's done an outstanding job since he's been here. But it feels like this year more than ever with the second halves, the way Michigan will just kind of wear teams down. And then at the mental toughness too. And Harbaugh was talking about that today, crediting part of that to Ben Herbert and what his strength staff does, because those guys are the ones really that spend the most time with the players, and the way they've built up those mental, those calluses throughout the offseason, throughout the season. They've been the tougher team, and now they have that mental edge. So I think it has to do with a lot of different things. Part of it was I think they decided to just kind of roll with Donovan Edwards there and let him go. And at some point, that offensive line and that running back are too talented to kind of contain for the whole way. But I did feel like Ohio State's defense didn't have as much juice in the second half as well. And that's a credit to what Michigan was doing and how strong they were and how consistent they were.
They were tired. Ohio State was tired. They quit late in that game, but it was just Michigan that kept making plays. And you talk about meat left on the bone. This was, no meat left on the bone for the first time this season in this game on Saturday. So I think something that helped break them was, to me, I think it happened. There were 2 plays in the second half. It was the Colston Loveland touchdown, another big play. You go in the locker room. Okay, we gave up a couple busted coverages in the first half. No big deal. Go back to the locker room, make your adjustments. It won't happen again, right? Michigan comes out and hits them on another one. And then really the biggest play of this game, which I watched, I think it was an 8-minute highlight package of the game after the fact. And it's stunning that this play wasn't even in there. But the biggest play of this football game was Mike Sainristil's pass breakup in the end zone with Michigan up 31-20. He's going up and making a play on a guy that I think is 6'5", 260, just bigger than him. Credit to Jalen Harrell, too. Cade, he got stuck out in coverage against Cade Stover on that 4th down play.
Yep, early on.
And made a nice play. And that's another one of those just make enough plays to keep yourself in it in the first half and then stick to what you do. But to me, Mike Sainristil's pass breakup, that goes from being a touchdown and you're up maybe 3 or 4 points, depending on the decision Ohio State makes, to you're up 8. And then from there, Michigan's offensive line took back over. Donovan Edwards got back into a groove. And, when all was said and done, that's what happened. I mean, the most, I think if you're an Ohio State fan or you're someone in that program, you're kind of going, okay, well, we did everything we possibly could. And they did, to stop the run and prevent it from being like last year's game where you just got run all over. The box score looks the same, but really we were talking about it most of the game, Clay, is that their linebackers were flowing directly downhill. The communication was better, and it helped them that Blake Corum wasn't out there. But Ohio State more or less had the run snuffed out. And then Michigan, like I said, that you didn't necessarily have to do, but they found a way to do in this game, was they fought fire with fire and beat Ohio State with big plays through the air, the ones that Michigan didn't really give up. So to me, that was just the difference in the game period. We didn't know that Michigan had that in them. I'd stop short of saying they ran offense like a service academy this year, but they never had to really lean on the passing game to get them back into a game. And shout out to JJ McCarthy, shout out to Cornelius Johnson and the guys who made those plays that made the game happen. So,
and I think we have to also point out something too, where throughout the season, there's been this kind of ongoing debate. Does Michigan save stuff for Ohio State, or, how come? And it's not really an excuse for like why the passing game hasn't been better. They're not trying to be average in any aspect to save stuff for Ohio State or to not show that they're good at one thing or whatever. But there were some really creative stuff. I thought they broke a couple tendencies that were really good. The Colston Loveland touchdown that you mentioned just a couple minutes ago was one of those where it was kind of a double play action to the running back, play action to, I believe it might've been AJ Henning coming on a reverse. And then JJ turned around and Colston Loveland, who's an outstanding tight end already as a freshman, did the rest and, was wide open, was able to get open. Then they do the Kalel Mullings pass, which was set up by getting stuffed on 3rd and 1 earlier in the game. You don't want that to happen, but ended up working out to Luke Schoonmaker. There were several other examples. So I think Michigan did a really good job of kind of keeping Ohio State off balance too, where maybe they thought one thing was coming, but it wasn't. And honestly, stopping Michigan's run early, making them do something else, may have given Michigan a little bit of an edge in a certain way, because then Ohio State had to figure out, well, shoot, they are throwing with some success. How do we do both, And then once they try to figure that out, Donovan Edwards is running. I think Donovan Edwards is still running down the sideline.
He just ran right past here.
Yeah, actually. There he goes again. So
he made it all the way downriver.
Yeah, so I mean that, it was just the perfect combination of everything, I think, from the play calling. And those guys haven't got a ton of love, the offensive play callers this year, because, they lean on the run game, stuff like that. But there's still a lot that goes into the run game too. And then when you rise to the occasion and save your best stuff or call your best stuff or call stuff at the right time in the biggest game, you deserve a shout out. They were on three's coordinators of the week, Matt Weiss and Sharon Moore, and I thought more than well deserved. And hell, maybe Jesse Minter was snubbed a little bit too. But it's a great problem to have when you're trying to pick between, which side of the ball played better, which coordinator was better, which player was better. There were about 10 guys that played their best game of their life in this game. And that means that you win by 22 against Ohio State, and it's a game week. And here we are on Monday night having fun. So just an incredible game overall. I can't even remember what question we're answering anymore.
Yeah. A quick super chat from George Ramos said, did Coach Harbaugh pretend that the running game wasn't working in the past few games to fool OSU into their bad scheme? No, I think what why the fact that Michigan's running game wasn't working the last few games is that they actually played defenses that were worth something, that were actually somewhat well coached, and able to play disciplined. Because that's run defense is, yeah, you got to have the guys up front and you got to, be physical, but you also just have to be disciplined at every step. So that is that I don't think they were playing possum or anything like that. I don't know why my TV is going off all of a sudden.
Does he mean pass game or run game though?
The running. I think what George is trying to ask is if Michigan was playing possum, and I don't think that was the case. I just think they were playing teams that had good defense. Illinois, tremendous defense. Ohio State, you broke them, but coming into the year, we were like we said earlier. I mean, it was a team that was flowing to the ball better. They were assignment sound for at least maybe the first 2.5 quarters of that game, at least in run defense. Also, a bold decision to go to the Big 12 to fix your defense and hire a guy like Jim Knowles, but
and now they're stuck with him.
yeah, enjoy, have fun with that. So, George does go back and say the pass game. He clarifies. So, no,
because I was going to say that. I mean, they ran all over Nebraska, right? If I recall correctly, and then Illinois. I mean, things were going well until Blake came out. But yeah, thank you, George, for the question. And
they're not being instructed to play possum. Like they left plays on the field, and I think maybe a blessing in disguise. I mean, everyone was just so locked in, and I know that you'll look at JJ McCarthy's numbers, and you'll see that he was 12 of 24, but he was 100% on the ones you gotta have. Okay, maybe he missed. I feel like maybe he missed one to Ronnie Bell early where he threw kind of high.
Yeah, and he admitted after the game too, he was a little amped up and he was sailing a couple, and really a lot of those incompletions were early on. But you're right, when he got to third down and then him using his legs too, you got to factor that in. He had a QBR of close to 90, so, and then the passer rating there of 183.3. So he was fantastic. And I'm not going to say he outdueled CJ Stroud because it just wasn't that type of game. It took everybody. It was a team effort. Ohio State was a little bit more leaning on Stroud. I think they dropped back 50 times, but it wasn't an outdueling of CJ Stroud, but it was an incredible performance and his best. And I think for JJ McCarthy going forward, we may just see a different quarterback now. Like, this just may be who JJ is. I mean, you win a game like that, you play like that in that environment, and we're getting later in the year. There's more chemistry now with the receivers, things like that. I think we could see him, really take off from this performance too.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that real fast, I mean, anyone who looked at JJ McCarthy's stats and said, gosh, he's the same guy as Cade McNamara, they're running the same offense, you're just I'm not trying to no, it is a shot at you. You watch the football games. Watch the games.
And by the way, also, there's nothing totally wrong with being close to Cade McNamara. Those guys were battling in camp, and Cade won a Big Ten championship as well. JJ, I think, is a better quarterback, has proven that, and has a higher ceiling, and that's why the future, including this weekend, is so exciting.
Yeah, and really quick on just those two. We'll get to Cade McNamara's transfer. We do have a question in the queue on that. I want to talk about our friends in Rogue Shop in a moment, I should say. The reason, again, Cade McNamara, JJ McCarthy, the best quarterback for their respective teams at the times that they were tasked to lead the football team. But the reason that JJ was the perfect guy for this team is you saw it a little bit in the Georgia game last year, where if you're in a bit of a rock fight where things aren't going your way, you got to be able to perform off schedule. And Michigan's passing game last year was very much kind of a rhythm and take what the defense gives you type of thing. And don't get me wrong, it was that this year. But what you saw on Saturday was, you know what? Blake Corum's out. They're not having any success running the football. Quarterback's got to make a play. And he made plays, plural, with his arms. He made plays with his legs. And yeah, I mean, I do think this is it feels like the start of something, to use the quote from last year. So
feels like the beginning. Yeah.
The beginning of something. That was it. Shout out again to Shane for another $2. This is only Anthony, me, name redacted. I'll say it, Jay Yoder. John Bacon picked a win. Shout out to me for that. Crack the Nut with a $5 super chat. Crack the Nut has been he's been blowing us up both on Saturday and today. So thank you for your support there.
I was
Before we
wrong.
move
Hand
on,
up. I actually the other day, I popped my arm out of its socket, putting my hand up and admitting I was wrong about the game. I thought Michigan was going to lose by 1 point. That's what I picked. Hand up. I was wrong. I'm happy to be working on game week stuff here this week and for the rest of the season. I didn't think it was impossible. But yeah, credit to you, Anthony, for picking it.
Thank you.
Pat on the back.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Man, winning by 22. I don't think anyone predicted that, but
No.
it was outstanding.
And I've explained this. I think I did it in the post-game show, and then I think maybe in a Twitter Spaces over the weekend. But basically, the rationale for the pick was I just felt like if you got this Ohio State team in a 4-quarter game, talk about the pipes bursting, right?
Yeah.
I kind of saw it going that way.
Because it was close to going that way a couple times this year for them.
Yeah.
Maybe not losing, but like even the Maryland game last week,
Yeah. I mean, it's happened several times to them. I mean, Notre Dame was a close call for them. Northwestern was obviously sketchy.
They ran away from Penn State, but
Maryland. Yeah. So let's talk about Rogue Shop real quick, and we'll get to still got a ton of questions in here, so we'll get to those. Our friends over at the Rogue Shop, you guys know all about them at this point. RogueShop.com. It's a husband and wife outfit led by our pals Richard and Charmaine, who are craft cannabis farmers specializing in small batch, sustainable plant medicine. Richard is a disabled combat veteran, and his wife is a certified CBD consultant and life coach. The Rogue Shop operates out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and they work to not only grow and manufacture, but also educate about THC-based medicines. So if you're looking for products that can help diffuse stress, anxiety, any Ohio State listeners, this probably applies to you. Our promo code will apply to you. 10% off using promo code the Wolverine. Anxiety, chronic pain, insomnia. Rogue Shop's menu of products is perfect for you. And like we said before, they will hop on a live chat and answer your questions. You can call them on the phone. They will send you a handwritten note with your package. It's just an extremely personal touch they add with all their products there. So Delta 8, Delta 9, CBD, and THC products that are all lab direct without middlemen. Rogue Shop grows their own stuff. They use their own 2 hands to do everything. They grow their own cannabis. They manufacture it. Unlike everyone else who's turning to machines, that's the era we live in, machines and computers. This is a product that's made with love and a personal touch. So, Clayton, actually, you have a product you've brought to share with the class today.
Yeah, I always have this near me wherever I go. Basically, this pain cream does a great job. Any aches and pains, you just apply it, and it works fantastically. It feels great. They are a great company that we love to partner with as well. Great people, handwritten notes in every package, makes it feel like that personal touch. And if you go on that website, and I know it's up for the people on YouTube, but they have everything. Like they have everything you could possibly imagine and more. It's almost funny how many things they have on there. So they do a great job. They're out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, as Anthony mentioned, Midwest people, but also they have that all the CBD products. So it's a perfect site. I know people that have used CBD for a while that have switched over now. A lot of people on our message board. So and only positive reviews.
All right. Again, check out rogueshop.com. Promo code the Wolverine for 10% off. Shout out to our friends Richard and Shar. $5 super chat here from Kevin Finn, who has a question for us, and we can answer this question as, I'll say it, experts on the subject now.
Yes.
Pumped to be headed to Indianapolis next weekend. Any pregame suggestions? Go Blue. Kevin, I can, I'm not going to give away time. We don't want anyone stalking us or any of our enemies sending threats our way, but us getting in Friday night, the first stop will be a steak dinner at Prime 47 down there downtown. If you can get in there, that's phenomenal. Get into St. Elmo's if you can. We did both last year. That was delightful. Just take it. I forget someone in the chat there's a Michigan bar down. It's kind of like Indianapolis's Michigan bar. I want to say O'Reilly's, but someone can correct me on that. That was
right.
hopping on game day last year. A lot of spots to check out. Indianapolis is, listen, it's not Myrtle Beach. It's not, it's not a vacation destination, but for events like this and for what we do, it's walkable. There's restaurants as far as the eye can see. Pretty amazing city. So
yeah, try to get a reservation at a steakhouse if you're going in Friday night. As Anthony said, it's really hard to. We got one of the last reservations at Prime 47. St. Elmo's is great. Harry and Izzy's, which is run by the same people. St. Elmo's right next door. Really good as well. I know there's others, Capitol Grill. So try to get at one of those. But I will say, like, the vibe on that Friday night last year in Indy with tons of Michigan fans and really a lot of Iowa fans too. Everyone was excited to be there. Iowa hadn't been there in 6 years. Michigan had never been there for a Big Ten championship. It was incredible hopping around. And then Saturday, we couldn't partake as much, being that we had to work until like 5 a.m. But every single of those, one of those little Irish pubs around the stadium and by the basketball arena as well, were just hopping. The streets were going crazy. So much fun. Find a tailgate too. There's some big lots they have right outside of the stadium. You know, being an NFL stadium, it's a little better set up that way. So just try to do all that stuff. And yeah, it's going to be hard to get in places. I will say that when Indy has, you know, big events like this, it's sometimes you're starving because there's just everywhere is packed, but it's a great town.
absolutely. So yeah, Kevin, let us know where you wind up going. Hopefully you find a spot to park it. We're going to go through, we've got quite a few here. So again, if you would like to have a question that moves you to the front of the line, feel free to use that donate button below and we'll do so. But these have been waiting very patiently here. This one's from Schaub Fam, who says, I'd like to hear the guy's thoughts on what kind of program Cade McNamara might transfer to. Maybe find his way back to Notre Dame. I think he'd be a great fit. Would hate to see it, first and foremost, but I think Notre Dame would be a fit. There's been some Iowa buzz, which I think is, for what they do offensively, I think is a tremendous fit. They've been kind of needing a quarterback of, you know, at least even just as a game manager. And I think Cade's a little bit more than that. So that would be a fit. I don't know what Wisconsin will wind up doing with Luke Fickell. We'll see. But yeah, it's tough to say, because is he going to want to look for a team that runs stuff that he's familiar with, or is he going to want to go somewhere and air it out and show that he can be a guy that can lead a passing offense and isn't just a quote unquote game manager? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, he could do either, really, to be honest. If you look at him in high school, he was a guy that aired it out a ton, 2-time Gatorade Player of the Year in Nevada. So, and then he came here and he did a really good job of managing the offense and making some plays when he had to. Notre Dame would be a very good fit, to be quite honest, because high-level offensive line play, they have good running backs, and they have good defense. Iowa would seem like a good fit, but I wouldn't want to play behind that offensive line and with that lack of run game. But if he could kind of spring that offense and, you know, give it a boost, then I think you're looking at potentially a pretty good team. So there's some good fits out there. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes out west, a little bit closer to home. But just in terms of, you know, wherever he ends up, I wish him well, because he's a first-class guy. Cade McNamara was, you know, kind of always that guy that was working behind the scenes, and then he finally got his moment in that Rutgers game in 2020, and really the end of the Wisconsin game the week before that. Took advantage of it, became a leader, was one of the key guys on that 2021 team, and not only, you know, on the field, but with his leadership. And you could just tell in his interviews how much he, you know, everything, you know, the team success meant to him. He becomes a captain. Obviously, things didn't work out in his favor this year, but I wish him nothing but the best. Hope his rehab goes well. And I'll be writing a column about his legacy over at thewolverine.com this week. But hey, there are a lot of Michigan quarterbacks that have not won a Big Ten title, especially recently. I don't think Tom Brady won one as the starting quarterback either, maybe a share. So he is in elite company there. And he was the right guy at the right time, Anthony. As you said earlier, I think JJ is the right guy for this time. But Cade McNamara will always be that guy. And there's kind of that iconic picture. I think it's his profile picture on Twitter. You know, him kind of carrying that game ball. And I know he was going to give that to Hassan Haskins. But after the Ohio State game, running up the tunnel, high-fiving somebody with that ball in his hand and the smile on his face. And that'll be kind of how I always remember him. And at the Big Ten championship game as well. So fantastic kid. Looking forward to watching him and rooting for him.
Shane Johnson wants to make another cameo. $1.99 super chat says the Don just scored again, and oh no, so did Cornelius Johnson. The Don.
Gus
there it
Johnson.
is. Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it on McNamara there. Quick one for you, Clay. This guy by the name of Tommy Duncan who says,
"Oh, there he is."
Shout out to Clayton Sayfie from one Hope College classmate to another. Happy you got to see that W in Columbus. Keep up the great work. So
Tommy, hope you enjoyed that one as well. It was great being there in Columbus, but man, celebrating with family and friends and stuff like that, watching at home or wherever you're watching, I'm sure was great too. Enjoy this ride. It has been super, super fun.
Dennis G has had one patiently. I think he may have even just resent it into the chat, but same question. Hoping, in parentheses, that Michigan goes through to play Georgia in the national championship game, what 2 or 3 keys or changes will make it a win? I'll be honest, I haven't watched a ton of Georgia this year. I think Stetson Bennett, from what I've seen, has played even better than he did last year, but they're not. Last year's Georgia team was defensively probably the best, most talented unit of guys on one side of the football we've seen since 2019 LSU. I mean, look at all the first round picks, and even some of those guys came back this year. So I think the key is that, we'll see what happens with Blake Corum and if he's able to kind of get back to something that approximates himself. But I think you're going to have to be able to throw the ball and be balanced offensively. I think that's, to me, the biggest change from last year's game. You have any thoughts on how they would match up with Georgia? Right now, I think the thing with me is that you want to just have, assuming you're going to play them, it would be, we think, in the national title game. You want to just get there and have that problem first.
Yes.
And to me, it's less about the national title in that case and more about, obviously, if you're there, you may as well just win the damn thing. But it's more, okay, how much further has this thing truly been pushed since the last time those two teams met each other? So thoughts on Georgia?
Yeah, just a couple things in general as well. Going into this playoff, and I think Michigan's a lock to get in no matter what happens this weekend against Purdue. Mm-hmm. Let's say things hold right now, and even if they don't, you got number 5 Ohio State could potentially come in and join the field. But last year you had Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and Cincinnati. It was really, although the seeding was, a little scrambled up there, Michigan was actually the 2, Georgia was the 3. You had Alabama, Georgia, and then there was a drop-off, Michigan, drop-off, Cincinnati. Now you look at it, it's Georgia, little drop-off, minimal. There's some people making the case, many people actually I've seen on Twitter making the case that Michigan should be number 1 right now. You have Michigan and then TCU, USC. First of all, going into that 4, you're in a significantly better spot. You're up a rung, in my opinion. You're number 2 at the very least. So you feel like you should be in that national championship game, which sounds insane to say. Secondly, going into Georgia, I love Mike McDonald. I thought what he did last year was great, and he turned around that defense, and he was a major reason why Michigan was able to have that renaissance that we're still kind of watching today. But you got to have a better game plan, I think, defensively. Georgia got the ball out really quick. Georgia was, basically called a perfect game. They got Michigan off balance. They hit the edges. They hit a couple deep balls, and that was kind of your story. But also, you're not going to be going against a generational Georgia defense. You're going to be going against an elite one, though. So Blake Corum's got to help there. I think you do have to be balanced in that game, and JJ's going to have to make quite a few plays. You got it done against Ohio State the way you did, which was super impressive, and it shows that, you do have some extra gears here. But you're playing with fire if you're doing that every single game, especially when you're playing elite talent. If you're going to play these teams multiple times in a row, then it's playing with fire a little bit. So I think you do have to be balanced on offense. That was a good point. But get everybody healthy. I saw another comment in there. Do we rest Mike Morris and Blake Corum and wait till the playoff? Based on what I saw last week, and we strongly believe Blake Corum will not play this weekend, but could, probably be back for the playoff. Mike Morris, I'd say rest him up because he tried to give it a go, but when it's a hamstring, which I think it is based on what we saw in the Nebraska game when he went down, let him rest a little bit more, get him back at 100%. You had guys step up last week that showed they can do it. So long-winded way of saying get healthy, have a little bit better of a defensive game plan because you kind of know what they're going to do and how they're going to attack you, and then be balanced on offense with Blake Corum, JJ McCarthy, all those guys. So
a quick $5 super chat from Josh Sanford, just saying thanks, guys. We appreciate that, Josh. Someone else had asked, where do these donations go? Yeah, we're not. This isn't like a tip jar. We're not putting it in our pocket and going down to the party store and buying a 6-pack of beer, or depending on how good of a night it is, or how generous Shane Johnson is, maybe a 24-pack of beer or a couple of them. Your support of this channel is essentially giving us the resources to keep doing content like this, to be able to sit here on a Monday night and field your questions, to have the equipment. I'm using a new microphone tonight. Things like that goes towards travel budgets and resources and all that. So again, it's not a bonus for us as hosts. It's a bonus for you. Actually, it gives us the resources we need to give you, continue to give you, objectively speaking. It's not objective. I'm totally biased. The best package of Michigan coverage in this market. So that's the way I see it anyways. So
that's a great way to spin it, where it's actually, I mean, they're paying it. We appreciate all the people out there, but yeah, I mean, we wouldn't be doing it probably if it wasn't making money. So
absolutely. So thank you guys for your continued generosity. It blows me away, especially when we have, just the queue loaded up with questions before we even go on the air. So let's go to Christopher Robbins, who says, credit to Jim Harbaugh partnering with brother John to improve the Ravens style of defense via Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter. Also great assistant coaching hires. Sharon Moore, Matt Weiss, Mike Hart, Steve Klingscale, Mike Elston. Not that Jim Harbaugh didn't think this way before, but I think a big realization is that, for this to be an all hands on deck effort to get to the heights that we've seen them get to over these last 2 years, as a head coach, you're only going to be as successful as the men that you put around you. And he is not only hit doubles and triples with these hires, he's hit grand slams. I mean, every guy at every position is just squeezing every single drop they can of potential out of those guys in that room. And it's been phenomenal. I mean, it's the foreign or the brotherly exchange program with the Baltimore Ravens has worked out fairly well. It's Matt Weiss, it's Mike McDonald, it's Jesse Minter. Hey, you know what? At the end of the day, you just want to hire good football coaches. And hey, if they're going to keep sharing them with each other, that works for me.
Completely agree. Yeah, he is. He's always hired well. I think that's he's always evaluated talent well, both in players and coaches. But it does feel like this last batch of hires he made when he replaced 6 assistants before the 2021 season has been off the charts, probably some of his best. And as Jim Harbaugh said today, there are some guys on this staff that are beyond ready to be a head coach and move up themselves. Sharon Moore, one of them. That is a great way to measure, how good, your coaches are and how good you're hiring. And it's also, something that is just natural. When you're really good, when you're a program that's winning at a high level, other people are going to covet your guys. It's a great problem to have. And really, you would trust that Jim Harbaugh is going to make some really good hires when those guys leave. But all really, really talented coaches. When you listen to these guys talk and speak with them, I mean, just the football knowledge, you can tell that, the relationships with their players, you can tell that they're able to connect and teach well. It's kind of the whole package, and they recruit pretty well. This cycle hasn't been that great, but these are guys with some proven track records recruiting, most of them that were listed anyway. So, it's kind of the whole package, and I think Harbaugh did a great job with these guys.
He certainly has. And again, it's just emblematic of success. When your assistants have success, that breeds success, and those guys are going to get opportunities to go elsewhere. And, you want to keep guys around, but the fact of the matter is if a Power 5 team is going to hire Sharon Moore to be their head coach, that's going to be the way it's going to be. So I know I got away with words there. That's the way it's going to be. So let's go to Brian Albee, who says, what about Jim Harbaugh's coaching ability for position changes? I think he's brilliant with these, by the way.
Yep.
Richard Sherman at Stanford, Hassan Haskins from linebacker to running back at Michigan. I actually think didn't he go from running back to linebacker back to running back?
Yeah, I think he may have come in as a running back recruit, but then like he started at linebacker once he got here. But I could be wrong on that too. Yeah, he has such an eye for this type of stuff. Even Steve Klinkscale, when Harbaugh called him like 10 days before spring ball started and said, "Hey, what do you think about Mikey moving over to D-back?" And Klink was like, "Man, I don't know. I don't really see that." And then here we are with just the absolute textbook PBU on Cade Stover in the end zone. There's been many plays throughout the season. Mike Sainristil's been probably as good as you can get in terms of a position switch. Even Kalel Mullings, I know he's the running back in high school, and they tried him out there in the spring and fall camp. But, he makes a big play. Mike Barrett as well as another guy who played offense in high school, and now here he is leading Michigan with 11 tackles against Ohio State, probably played his best game. Owen Marishek at Stanford as well, played both ways, running back and linebacker, I believe. He likes stuff like that, excites him, trying to figure out who could come over. Dom Judice is now an offensive lineman. I know he's hurt right now, but there's all sorts of things he's thinking about. He's always thinking of something, and most of those moves have worked out. Ben Mason, they tinkered with him, but probably not the right move there. Maybe more out of necessity than anything. But yeah, Anthony, you're right. I mean, and so is Brian. They've been great.
Let's go to G Money, who says, "Crazy when you sit and think we have beaten OSU and Penn State by more than 20 points each. That's crazy. It's great to be alive right now after suffering the last 20 years."
And
yeah,
Michigan
I was always
State.
of the opinion that eventually, what's that?
And Michigan State. When was the last time that happened?
Well, he's talking about beating two good teams.
I know, but like just think of it too in a broader sense. A good shot at Michigan State, though. I agree, they're not good. They're 5-7. Season's over. But think of that too. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State by more than 20 points. Life is pretty good. But yeah, go ahead.
It's incredible. We are so used to Michigan losing again. For years, they've lost. They've gone 9-3, 10-2, 8-4, and lost to the toughest teams on every single schedule or in every single season they've had. Before these last two, and to not only every narrative has been marked off for this coaching staff. You couldn't win on you couldn't win on the road, and you couldn't beat your rivals. This is the first season that they've had in a long time where they've beaten both of their rivals, Michigan State and Ohio State, in the same.
Go 3, yeah.
Insane, just an insane turnaround. And I know for all the talk that was made about their non-conference schedule, and make no mistake about it, calling a spade, historically light, right? We didn't know anything about this football team really until they beat Maryland. And it was a good effort for them. It's not like they played terribly in that game, but it was almost like shocking the jump in competition. But
yeah,
all of that, you go back and you look at the schedule, and they beat the brakes off Iowa at Kinnick Stadium, ran the ball down their throats at Kinnick Stadium, which nobody does. They beat the hell out of Penn State. They beat Ohio State on their home field. Again, I know there's been a debate about, should Michigan actually be the 1 seed? Listen, I mean, Georgia has 2 of the best wins in college football right now, blowing out Oregon, really blowing out Tennessee. But I think you can make the argument for that.
Well, Michigan has the best win, right?
I would say so.
And
the road at Ohio State?
Yeah, because I would argue that Georgia's best win is Tennessee, but that was in Athens. Where was the Oregon game again?
Neutral. I think that was in Atlanta. So basically
a semi-home game. Michigan blew the doors off a number 8 by 24 points, and then the now number 5 team. They're only number 5, by the way, because you killed them down in Columbus. So, and you beat them by 22. I know the in-between games, the SEC, those middle tier and lower tier are better, I would say, than the Big Ten this year. It is very light right now in the Big Ten, and that's why it kind of felt like an uneventful 12-0 outside of, moments here, moments there, and then obviously Saturday. But you could argue that. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I think Georgia's the better team, but I think Michigan's resume stacks up better than maybe Heather Dinich or some of these people would like to admit.
I mean, when the SEC earmarks an entire weekend to play Who was their crossover game this week? Yeah, Georgia beat Samford this year.
Yeah, and they play like the Citadel and all these teams. I mean, it shouldn't be allowed, to be honest. But
yeah, why does the SEC not get docked because they only play 8 conference games? It's 2022. Like, what are we doing here?
right, you have to take that into account too. Michigan's non-conference got slammed the whole time, but they play 9 conference games. And the SEC, one of them is always against FCS. And by the way, the second to last game, you're playing, teams that you're talking about, Samford. By the way, that's Michigan's playing Illinois. They're in a dogfight, and Blake Corum gets hurt. So, I mean, it's kind of.
I'm with you. I think I talked myself into Michigan having a case for number 1.
I'm not even, I'm saying it's close. It's close.
I say let them have their home game, and Michigan will see them in LA. Sounds like a plan to me.
Hey, we'll be there.
We'll close things out with this one from Christopher Robbins. I figured we might get a question on this. What do you guys think of the Big Ten ruling on the MSU tunnel situation? Fair. I mean, okay, they gave Michigan a quote unquote reprimand for whatever it was. A reprimand is just basically a slap on the wrist. There's no fines. There's no action taken for apparently letting their guys go into their own tunnel is grounds for a reprimand.
Or was it the security? I'll
say this. I mean, they did change after that game. Referees and security would not let Michigan go up the tunnel until everyone from the opposing team was up. And that's, again, probably the right. I mean, but you take a step back and objectively look at it, probably the right move. But it kind of feels weird for Michigan to be reprimanded because 7 Spartan players who will have, it seems like will have charges brought against them. One of them for felonious assault. It just, I don't know. It is what it is. To me, it seemed like an attempt to add a level of culpability to both sides. I don't see that, but as far as Michigan State's punishment, they got fined $100,000. All of these suspensions were deemed appropriate by the Big Ten. Kari Crump will be suspended the first 8 games of next year, wherever he's playing. I don't know if that will be at Michigan State or not.
Wherever he is.
Wherever he is, or wherever he's being monitored from. Yeah, we'll see what happens with all. And I think they said one MSU staffer was handled behind the scenes, and they were pleased with that. I don't know if that's
weird. Isn't that weird to you? I mean,
I don't know who that is. I don't know who that pertains to.
Would it be Ben Mathers, their director of, I believe, player operations or player personnel, who ran away scared?
I don't.
Or would it be the guy who kind of lowered a shoulder into Harbaugh? I don't know who that would have been. It's weird they would redact his name. I think the reprimand doesn't make sense to me because you had the same policies for, let's at least say a decade. I mean, it's really over 100 years, but like obviously things change, security, this and that. Nothing's happened. There's been nothing. I mean, I was at Rutgers. We're on the field after the game. And Michigan players are like, they had a couple guys with arms around each other talking after the game. Hey, nice play, great game, that sort of thing. I'm on the field at Ohio State on Saturday, and there are guys hugging each other, taking pictures after the game, all that sort of stuff. They have separate tunnels. If anyone wanted to go in, they could go in, but nobody was doing anything close to that. And that was a chippy game too. There was a headbutt. There was that little scuffle where Xavier Johnson was, I don't know what he was doing by the Michigan sideline. Luckily, no flags were thrown. I like that it was kind of kept like that. But no, it kind of seems to me, and it doesn't really matter the reprimand. You're right. Like I think they did it just as a throw in, but it's also like these guys commit a crime. I mean, potentially, right? They're facing charges.
Innocent until proven guilty, of course.
Well, this could have been avoided, whatever. So, like, I guess Michigan's at fault for whether it's security or whether it's having one tunnel or the procedures. It's the same procedures that teams are using across the country. It's the same procedures Michigan has used for years. Yeah, Chisel, who comments in and says, pretty sure it's a Sparty issue, not a tunnel issue, is completely correct, in my opinion.
Well, Michigan says mean things, and they're cocky about it. So
they ran a trick play, so
yeah. Yep.
Whatever.
Yep. Anyways, I think that's a good place for us to end this week's show. We will be back next week, potentially discussing a Big Ten championship. We'll know where Michigan's headed in the playoff, unless something. Michigan's in the playoff. I'm not even going to I won't even qualify that statement. Michigan will be in the playoff. This time next week, we'll know where. We'll be able to kind of settle things down and get a temperature for where things are going next. But thank you to all of you who watched live, those of you who are also generous enough to donate to the cause and maybe send us to the playoff. Who knows? Maybe next week's the telethon where we need to, it'd be like the Jerry's Kids thing where we're just asking for, no, we won't do that. We'll take your money to ask your question or answer your questions. Not take your money. We will graciously accept your money. But we appreciate you guys so much. Your support throughout this whole season has been insanely fun. Clayton, once again, happy to mix it up with you. I would assume Chris will be back with us next week. All hands on deck here heading into the college football playoffs. So for Clayton Sayfie, for producer Hutch behind the scenes, I'm Anthony Broome, and we will talk to you again next week.